There's no mystery. There's no like, you guys, he's got all sorts of crazy stuff that's going to come out. Nope. There's no motion. There's no intriguing design. There's nothing dynamic. This is, sideways passes, and running for your life. It's basically what Kyler Murray was doing a couple of years ago, which is go make a play, dude. Let's see what happens. Unsustainable.
So I am okay with sideways passes, just to pick up there for a second. For the record, I've jokingly called Cliff Kingsbury's offense the horizontal raid, and I think that's what it's going to be. As a passing offense yesterday, they had the lowest completed average depth of target in the National Football League, and it wasn't particularly close. They had 6 completions of a total of 17 that were behind the line of scrimmage. I think 10 of them were within 4 yards or less from the line of scrimmage of their 17 completions yesterday. So that tells you a lot. I think throwing to running backs can be smart, checking the ball down, getting it into space. Some of their explosive plays came from throwing it to Eckler, throwing it to Robinson.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, by the way. I love Austin Eckler to have more than, one target before garbage time. Again, their best offensive play was a third down give up where Eckler just made plays, and then they just said, no, that's enough of that, Austin. Go sit down on the sideline. We got to go a 2-yard trap to Brian Robinson where he takes on a million hits. Oh, man,
it was a frustrating day on both sides of the ball, really all phases, because we could add special teams into the equation.
They took a turn, didn't they?
Where their kicker went 0 for 2 and kicked the ball out of bounds on a kickoff and had a bad onside kick. But other than that, I thought Cade York was fantastic.
Yeah, great debut.
If you take the 2 field goals and the onside kick that went poorly and the kickoff that went out of the bounds, and you dismiss those, Cade York might be in the running for Special Teams Player of the Week.
I bet you got to eat from the post-game spread. You probably had a nice afternoon.
I'm not as upset as you are. I can tell already, which isn't to say that I'm not disappointed, because I totally am. I thought it was a pretty dreadful debut defensively. I've got really high hopes when you go hire the defensive-minded coach and he and Joe Witt come in here that they're going to make a lot of these guys that were held over better. And they picked a lot of these players new. I mean, there are 30 new players here. So as much as people are going to want to make this a big Ron Rivera bash fest all season long, and plenty of that is deserving and will happen, don't get it twisted. A lot of these guys are handpicked. I mean, the 70% of the roster is new. They had an offseason with a lot of money, right? And a full draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to have to get production from their guys as we go on. But just, I guess as an aside, what I would say off the top today, you've already come from the top rope. I'm going to take my turn dropping some elbows at times, is twofold. Number one, week ones can be very misleading.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of times in this league where you see something in week one and you think you know something, and then there's no bigger change in the NFL, in my opinion, from the first week to the second week often. So it's very, very possible they come out, they whoop the Giants, and we feel very differently, or they just look a lot different. It's a week-to-week league. So I'm leaving that open as a possibility. That's first. Nothing is necessarily gospel yet, and I'm not a small sample reactor generally. The second thing I want to say is we're going to break this game down as a single entity. What people like to do sometimes is extrapolate that out into what you guys are saying is you don't believe in this player, you don't believe in this coach, you don't believe. I'm talking about a football game. 60 minutes of football was played. It's all we got so far, and we're going to analyze it from as many perspectives as possible. So if I say this guy had a bad game, it doesn't mean he's a bad player. If I say this guy didn't do this well, it doesn't mean he never will. But I think those are two important caveats out of the chute, just to make sure to start the season, everyone gets off on decent footing here. Let's start at the top and work our way down. Okay. Dan Quinn. My fear when he was hired is that he's Ron Rivera with a backwards hat. Yesterday, from a coaching standpoint, didn't feel that different than that. He kicked the field goal on a 4th and 3 from the 29 with a kicker that nobody trusts. They missed from 47. You should almost never be kicking from in that situation when you've got the best athlete and playmaker on the field with his feet running around like Daniels was.
Because you could see what they thought when, hey, we need something short-ish yardage. We got a cheat code, and they do. They can run that read option, and they're going to get it most of the time. That's how they scored their touchdowns.
4th and 3 from the 29, you kick a field goal. They were down 6-0. They missed. Next time they got the ball, they were down 13 points on the road. The extra point over the 2-point conversion, I didn't have as big a problem with. 1:55 to go in the third quarter, but just the math didn't math. It didn't really make sense. If you don't get it, it's a 10-point game, still very much in play. If you do get it, it's a 1-possession game. You're right there. And they decided to kick the extra point there and keep it a 2-possession game. not sure how you could have watched what was happening and felt like that was the best idea.
So yeah, I'm even more extreme on that one. I'm never as bothered as some of the analytics folks on this. It's one of my weird, I don't want to say anti-analytics takes, but I think too much happens in the league where
It
I'm
was
going
the third quarter too.
right. I'm going if I've the only time I would go for 2 mathematically is when I had to. Like in other words, I will not get enough possessions to come back and tie this game. In general, I default to taking the points. That one I don't hate as much, but totally understand the argument against my view.
Don't understand why they didn't call a timeout at the end of the first half.
This one I can't get on board with. Yeah.
Save some time. Please go get points. Sometimes the best way to get your passing game in rhythm and get your quarterback going is that end of half, hurry up, where they give you the middle of the field because they're protecting the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
You can make some easy throws for chunks.
Even if you don't get anything out of it, it's worth doing.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think oftentimes teams do at least get completions out of it, even if you can't get down with spikes and kick a field goal. And they just decided to not call timeout and then take a knee and go to the half. Didn't really get that. One other coaching issue, they called a timeout at the very start out of halftime of the next drive when they were trailing in a game on the road. The misuse of clock management to the point where you're burning those timeouts, irrelevant yesterday, I would say, Danny, but just big picture, not a great sign. And maybe it's as simple as if you talk to Dan Quinn, hey, I got a rookie quarterback. We were trying to sort some things out. He couldn't quite get it set in at the time that was needed. But those types of things you don't see when you watch the real good teams like last night, Detroit and the Rams. That kind of crap's not happening.
Yeah, that to me is so unacceptable. If it's a 4th and 1, I guess I can get behind it. I'd still like my ducks in a row. It's a 3rd and 10 where it wasn't some genius play call out of the timeout. It was this one's busted. He ran out of the sideline and they got lucky. They got bailed out by a defensive holding. They'd go on to score on that drive. So people are going to say, well, it ended up working out. It didn't. They were beyond fortunate. That is a waste of a timeout in a game that at that point, by the way, was still pretty close.
It was.
I think it was a 9-point game at that juncture, but I could be wrong. But the point is, it was still not out of reach. You cannot squat those second half timeouts, especially, are so unbelievably precious, right? Like, and it wasn't like the play clock was running down either. It was like, yeah, this isn't going to work, whatever. You can't have that. This is the NFL.
Another thing on Dan Quinn before we move on. I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet necessarily, but all I've thought about as it pertains to coaching decisions from this game really is at the very end of the game, they were down 37-14. So that is quick math here, 23 points. There's 2 minutes left. They're doing that 2-minute drill. Number one, I was a little surprised Jaden Daniels was even still in the game, but okay, no problem. Let's go on. Like I said earlier, what you should have done at the end of the half, a 2-minute drive. Let's get some confidence. He went 5 of 5 for 55 yards against a, Charmin soft defense, like whatever. He falls into the end zone for that 1-yard touchdown, but he took multiple shots on goal line runs, like between the tackles down at the goal line, down by almost 20 points. Why? Why is that happening? Sorry, more than 20 points, almost 25 points. Why was he like slamming the football into the line of scrimmage for his 15th and 16th carries of the day, taking shots against the goal line defensive front, trying to make a stop in front of the end zone? That's Brian Robinson territory, Austin Eckler territory. I hated that they were even allowing that to be a possibility at that point of the game.
Yeah, if you're in a close game next week against the Giants and need one to win the game in the fourth quarter, dial it up.
Different story.
I'm with you. Yeah.
You were down 37-14 with a minute and a half to play, and he is lowering his shoulder trying to push the pile, getting slammed by 300-pound defensive tackles in week 1 of an 18-week marathon.
Yeah, in a game that's over.
206 pounds.
Yeah, in a game that's over. In a game that's over. Yeah, it's that was peculiar to me. Again, it's one of those where I remember Ron Rivera, one of those times, and it's hard not to compare the two. I apologize, but there was they were getting the doors blown off by somebody. Maybe it was the Baltimore game during his first year, whatever it was, and they kicked a field goal to avoid the shutout. Like, I just don't do that kind of crap. Like, you wanted the scoreboard to look a little bit better, or like try to pretend for some positive reinforcement for the kid, or make a stat line look more interesting with the second touchdown. It's just not for me.
All right, so that'll be enough on Daniels. From a coordinating standpoint, I mean, we talked about the defense being just utterly outplayed. Baker Mayfield looked like Baker Manning. I think 13 completions on 14 attempts to wide receivers Godwin and Mike Evans. Emmanuel Forbes got benched and hurt, or both, or I don't know which order it was, but he had 2 15-yard penalties on one play, which I've never seen. where he interfered by grabbing a face mask to save a touchdown when he was beat. Benjamin St-Juste actually had really good coverage on one touchdown he gave up, and gave up 2 touchdowns to Evans.
Almost had a pick on a really nice play.
He did. He made a nice play there. But just overall, I thought in the secondary, communication issues, as if we hadn't heard that before.
Like if I hear it's just communication again, I'll just start driving and won't stop till I get to the sun. Like, doesn't matter who the coach is, doesn't matter who the position coach is, doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is. It was the same with Josh Norman. It was the same before him when guys are wide open or just jogging in the secondary for huge gains, touchdowns, etc. Oh, it's just communication. Well, communicate then. Then just communicate to each other if it's that simple. I bet you it's not, though. I bet you have terrible personnel and no scheme's going to cover it. You could say whatever you want to. You can't keep up with good receivers. Emmanuel Forbes stinks. So talk all you want to each other. You can let each other know whose fault that one was when the big gain happens, where 3rd and 10 is like 1st and 1. It's too easy against this defense. I think that's
what the communicating is, by the way, is, hey, who screwed that one up? You did, right? No. Oh,
that was me. That was me, dude. It's just communication. Respectfully kiss all of my butt with that.
Same song and dance there. And then on the offensive side of the ball, if we're talking coordinators, you mentioned this, this idea that maybe they were keeping a secret. That was what I was holding out for.
Yeah.
Was preseason. You see one thing, and then week 1 is going to be something else. Because that's the last time they had the number 2 pick, Heisman Trophy winner, dual threat, new toy. They kind of designed this whole thing around him. That was certainly not the case. Kingsbury's plan, or the offense, whether it was his plan or not, basically in the first half was, hey, Jaden, go make a play. I don't know if Kingsbury liked that or didn't. They didn't design any runs for him in the first half, yet he broke the record for rushing yards by a quarterback in the first half for a Washington QB, just all on pure scrambles. But that was their entire offense, essentially. And we'll get into Jaden Daniels' performance in more detail coming up in just a few minutes here. But from a Cliff Kingsbury standpoint, the stuff that I hated about his offense in Arizona for at least 1 week packed in his luggage and came to Washington. He brought it with him to the nation's capital. Very little motion. You look at what the Rams and so many other really good teams do. Cooper Kupp last night caught 12 balls on motion, 42 snaps, 12 catches on motion, 30 of 42 snaps for him. He was put in motion. Terry McLaurin was in motion once or twice. He was lined up in the same spot in the formation, essentially every single play, which just sound the alarm and tell the defense where the only good receiver is going to be, please.
Yeah, they're easy to stop.
Never really stacked him up, never really got him free releases. Like all the stuff I worried about. Again, it's one game, and we'll see if it changes. But 4-year sample in Arizona said this is how he's going to do it, and he did it that way in the first game.
Yeah, and now, listen, there's no, like, I don't think there's any sort of, like, white knight coming in later either. I don't think there's any kind of rescue plan.
Noah Brown?
I mean, well, I suppose. I guess he's inactive. Maybe it was going to be Byron Pringle, but they cut him, so we'll never know. But, it's a couple gimmicks here and there. I think it was Aaron Schatz who said Zach Ertz is a catch and fall guy. What'd you see Zach Ertz do? 3 times. Caught it and fell. Not a lot of separation. It's tough in traffic. It's useful. He can help, but not that much. There's no way to make teams pay. There's no yards after the catch. That to me is the hallmark. If my offense is good, not every play, because it can't always happen, but guys catch it and they're able to run. And that's how that's like how you get some of your big plays. If you're not going to be able to block it up, have a double move go and connect 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 yards down the field. You need some of that dynamic stuff, and there's nothing there. That, to me, is an OC epidemic, or kind of a symptom when there's not much that puts the defense in jeopardy.
Yesterday didn't go the way anybody was hoping. There was this glimmer. Clary made a point in our pre-show meeting today. He's like, I had this little voice in my head telling me maybe they were going to be really good. I think we all have that voice. And as you get older and you're around this team longer, that voice dies out more and more and more. But if you're a young person, maybe that voice was pretty loud going into the game.
I used to have a voice.
They were down 37-14 with minute 15 to play yesterday before the touchdown late. Let's get into Jaden Daniels next. Again, it's not all bad. We've got some things that were encouraging as well in this first game. It is the beginning of a rebuild. They don't want to call it that. They're calling it a rebrand, retooling, finding north. Recalibrate is the word they use. Well, the calibration was not correct quite yesterday. That's for sure. I'm going to call it a rebuild. They can call it whatever they'd like. This is officially a rebuild.